There's a certain kind of silence that only a kitchen knows. The silence that comes before laughter, before footsteps, before the sound of plates being passed around the table. It's the silence that believes someone's coming. It had been months since all of them were together. The last time, it wasn't even planned, just a quick visit, a stop on the way somewhere more important. But tonight was different. Tonight, I decided to make it special. A family dinner. My last one, though no one knew that yet. I woke up early, the way I used to when the house was full. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky already had that pale promise of morning. I tied my old apron, the one with flour stains that never washed out, and started peeling potatoes. Each sound felt like memory, the knife tapping the board, the water running over my hands, the faint hum of the fridge. It felt like love. Simple, familiar, endless. By 9, the kitchen smelled like Sundays from years ago. Chicken roasting slowly, garlic and rosemary filling the air. I set the table with the good china, the white plates with the blue edges, and laid out the silverware that had only been used on birthdays and holidays. Henry's chair, still empty, stayed at the head of the table. I couldn't bring myself to move it. As I cooked, I imagined their laughter, Daniel telling stories from work, Linda teasing him for talking too much, little Emily dropping her fork and giggling. I could almost hear it echoing through the walls. It made me smile. For a moment, the house didn't feel so old. At noon, I called them, each of them. Just a gentle reminder. Dinner's at 6. Don't be late. All right. They all said the same thing. Of course, Mom. We'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. And I believed them. The afternoon stretched quietly. I polished the old wooden table until it shone like honey, set out cloth napkins, folded just the way Henry used to like, even lit the candle in the center, the one shaped like a rose, the one I'd been saving for when everyone was hay. It flickered softly in the daylight, as if it too was waiting. By 5, everything was ready. The gravy still warm, the bread soft, the salad crisp and cold. All that was missing was the sound of the doorbell. 5:30. No car in the driveway yet. 6 o'clock. I checked the clock twice, then the oven once more, as though that would bring them faster. 6:15. The candle burned shorter. I told myself traffic. Like, maybe they were picking up dessert. Anything but what the silence was beginning to whisper. At 7, the chicken had cooled. At 8, the candle had melted halfway down. And by 9, the only sound left was the clock. Ticking, steady, unbothered. I sat at the table, surrounded by everything I had made for them, and realized I had cooked for memories, not for people. It's a strange thing, to feed love that doesn't come home anymore. Waiting isn't silence. It's a sound you can only hear when your heart has run out of excuses. The clock said 9:12 p.m. The chicken was cold now, skin wrinkled, juice turned to glaze on the platter. The gravy had a thin layer of skin forming over the top. I sat there, hands folded on my lap, watching the candle's last thread of light tremble. For a moment, I almost laughed, because this wasn't new. I'd been waiting for years, just not always at the dinner table. I've waited at windows, for cars that slowed down but never turned in. I've waited by the phone, for voices that promised next weekend but never said when. And I've waited in silence, in rooms full of thy photos, for the sound of keys in the lock, the small proof that someone remembered I was here. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't waiting for them to arrive. I was waiting for myself to stop hoping. I remember dinners when this house felt alive, when chairs scraped against the floor, and the air smelled of roasted garlic and Sunday laughter. Daniel would sneak pieces of bread before the meal, and I'd pretend not to see him. Henry would carve the chicken with that little frown of concentration, the one that said I'm pretending this isn't work. And there'd always be music, the radio low in the background, some old country song about love that never ends. Linda would hum along while washing dishes, and I'd just watch, quietly full. I never thought then that fullness could vanish. The sound of a car outside made me jump. I stood up, almost knocking the chair behind me, pulled the curtains slightly aside. But it wasn't them. Just the neighbor's teenage boy, headlights cutting across my yard for a moment before vanishing down the street. I sat back down, my hand still holding the curtain for a second too long. The window pane was cold. It reminded me how long it had been since someone else's warmth filled this room. The candle gave up around 10. Its last flicker painted a brief heartbeat of light across the family photos on the wall. For an instant, I saw them all as they were, younger, louder, together. Then the room fell back into its natural color, quiet gray. I didn't blow it out. I just watched it die on its own. The longer I sat, the clearer the truth became. They weren't late. They just weren't coming. And maybe they hadn't been coming for a long time. Not really. Maybe the calls, the promises, the soon, Mom. They were just polite echoes, small comforts for them to feel like they hadn't left completely. But leaving doesn't always mean walking out. Sometimes it's just forgetting to look back. I imagined the door opening, Emily's small voice calling, "Grandma, it smells so good in here." Her little hands reaching for a roll before dinner, Linda scolding her gently, Daniel laughing, Henry smiling at the chaos. I could almost see them sitting there again. Chairs full, plates messy, the house beating like a heart. But when I blinked, the room was empty again. Just the table, the candle wax hardened on its plate. And me. People think loneliness is quiet, but it's loud. It talks to you in the voice of the ones who forgot to call. I picked up my plate, scraped the food into the bin. The smell that once meant love now only meant loss. I washed the dishes slowly, one by one, as if cleaning away the proof that I'd believed they would come. When I turned off the kitchen light, the room looked peaceful, like nothing had ever happened there at all. Tomorrow, I'll tell them dinner went fine. I'll say I ate early. I'll say I understand. Because that's what mothers do. We forgive the ones who forget, even when they forget us. Morning comes whether you're ready for it or not. The sun doesn't ask if you slept, or if you cried, or if you sat at a table all night waiting for voices that never arrived. I woke to the sound of sunlight crawling across the wall. The table was still set, the dishes washed, the chairs pushed in. The candle stub melted to nothing. The house smelled faintly of last night's dinner, roasted herbs and cooling bread. The smell that once meant home now meant proof. Proof that I had hoped again, and hope had left me sitting alone. The first thing I did was reach for the phone. The same old cordless one that's been in the kitchen since the day Henry bought it. The screen blinked, 0 missed calls, 0 new messages. I checked again, as if pressing the button twice might change the truth. But no, still nothing. I don't know why it surprised me. It wasn't the first time silence had chosen me. I made coffee, 1 cup, black. Didn't bother with the good china. The mug was chipped, but at least it hadn't forgotten me. I sat by the window, the one facing the driveway. The morning light looked the same as always, but the air felt heavier, like it knew what I'd waited for. Somewhere, a car door slammed. My heart jumped, but it was only the mailman. He waved from a distance. I waved back, pretending I wasn't hoping for someone else. After breakfast, I did what I always do when I feel too empty. I cleaned, wiped down counters that were already spotless, folded the napkins I never used, straightened Henry's chair, though it hadn't moved an inch since the day he left it behind. I found the phone again, still sitting on the counter, still quiet. I turned it over in my hands. Funny how something so small can hold so much absence. There were old voicemails still saved. Some so old the date no longer showed. Just the word, archived. I pressed play. Hey Mom, just checking in. We'll come by next week. Okay. Mom, it's me. Don't wait up. We're running late. Mom, Emily made you a drawing. We'll bring it next time. Each voice felt like a little ghost, replaying its promise, then vanishing again. The machine's voice came next. Flat, unbothered. End of messages. End of messages. End of waiting. End of pretending. I placed the phone down gently, as if setting down something fragile. Maybe it wasn't the silence that hurt most. Maybe it was realizing that silence was now the only thing that remembered me. It's strange, the things you remember when no one's around. I remembered Daniel calling me every morning the year after Henry passed, just to ask if I'd eaten. I remembered when Linda would send photos of the baby every week. I remembered when love spoke without needing reminders. Now it spoke through absence, through the quiet blinking of a phone that no longer rang. I sat there for hours, watching sunlight drift from one side of the room to the other. It felt like time itself was pacing, like even it was restless. By afternoon, I finally picked up the phone again, scrolled through my contacts. Daniel, Linda, Emily's school. I hovered my finger over Daniel's name, then stopped, because I already knew how the conversation would go. Mom, I'm so sorry, we got busy. Work's been crazy. We'll come by soon, promise. I didn't want apologies. I didn't even want explanations. I just wanted someone to show up without needing to be reminded that I existed. So I put the phone down. It's funny how the sound you miss most isn't laughter, or footsteps, or music. It's the sound of your own name, being said like it still matters. The clock struck 4. I hadn't moved in hours. The sun had started its slow descent again, painting the walls gold. The same gold that had once lit up family dinners and birthdays and Sunday mornings. The same gold that now fell across an empty chair, and a phone that never rang. I whispered to no one in particular. Maybe they'll call tomorrow. The words sounded foolish the moment they left my lips, but I smiled anyway, because even when love forgets you, hope refuses to learn how. When the house forgets to make noise, memory does it for you. It plays old laughter like a song you used to know by heart, and you can't help but hum along, even when it hurts. The smell of roasted chicken can carry time. One breath, and I'm back there, in a kitchen that felt too small for all the love it held. It was a Sunday evening, the windows fogged with steam, the air full of garlic and laughter. Henry was at the stove, pretending he could cook. He'd always say, "You do the magic, I just keep the fire going." And I'd laugh, because even his mistakes tasted like love. Daniel sat at the table, drumming a spoon against his cup. "Dad, hurry up. I'm starving." "Starving?" Henry said, turning with mock offense. "A growing boy like you, I just saw you eat 2 cookies before dinner." Linda rolled her eyes, her long hair tied back with one of my scarves. "Mom, tell him I made the salad. He doesn't believe I can make salad." "She can," I said, hiding a smile. "She just can't eat it without drowning it in dressing." They all laughed, that full, unguarded laughter that shakes walls and hearts alike. And in that moment, I remember thinking, this is what forever sounds like. Emily was just a baby then, in her high chair, banging a plastic spoon on the tray. Henry fed her mashed potatoes like she was royalty. 1 bite for Mommy, 1 for Daddy. And when she finally smiled, the whole room lit up as if she'd invented happiness. Linda looked at me and said, "She has your eyes, Mom." And Henry squeezed my hand under the table, his way of saying, "We did it. We built something good. I didn't know then that one day I'd sit in this same room and hear that laughter only in my head. The sound of forks scraping plates fades, replaced by the quiet hum of an old refrigerator. I blink, and the room returns to its present shape. No Henry, no Linda, no Daniel, no baby in the high chair, just me, and the faint smell of chicken I made last night, still haunting the air. I reached for one of the plates I hadn't yet put away, traced the rim with my finger. The same plates we'd used that night. One had a tiny crack from when Daniel accidentally dropped it while washing dishes. He'd been so scared I'd be angry, but I wasn't. I'd laughed and said, "That's how it becomes ours. A house without a few cracks isn't a home." And now, decades later, that same plate sat empty before me, cracked, but still hey, just like me. Sometimes I think about that last dinner we all shared together before Henry passed. No one knew it was the last. We never do we? He'd made a toast, his voice shaking slightly from the arthritis already in his hands. "To this table," he'd said, "may it always be full, and may we never forget who we're sharing it with." Everyone clinked glasses. I remember the way the light hit his wedding band, that little gold ring catching the flame from the candle. I thought, even time can't dull that shine. But time dulls everything, even light, even laughter. I close my eyes, and the house hums again. Plates clinking, chairs scraping, Emily's laughter ringing like bells. And then, silence. When I open my eyes, the light has changed. The sun has started to set, and the shadow of the chair stretches across the floor like an echo that forgot to fade. We always say we'll do it again someday. Another dinner, another visit, but someday keeps moving further away, until it turns into never. I stand, walk to the window, and look out at the driveway, still empty, still waiting. The reflection in the glass startles me for a moment. It's not the woman from those dinners anymore, not the young wife, not the mother, just me, older, quieter, still setting the table for ghosts. I used to think love was measured by how many people filled your home. Now I know it's measured by how long you keep the table ready, even when no one's coming. When you've run out of people to talk to, words start finding their own way out. They crawl into pages, into silence, into the spaces where love used to live. It was after midnight when I decided to write it. The candle on the table was only a stub by then, its flame bending, as if tired of standing guard for no one. The house had that stillness that comes after waiting too long. I pulled out my old stationery box, the one with the floral print on the lid, and found a sheet of cream-colored paper. The edges were slightly yellowed, like everything that's been patient too long. I sat in Henry's chair, the one I hadn't touched since the day he left, and I began. "My dearest family." I wrote, "I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. Maybe I'll hide it away. Maybe you'll find it one day, long after you've cleaned out this house, and wondered why there are so many notes tucked into strange places. I wanted to tell you about tonight. I made dinner for everyone, the chicken the way Daniel used to like it, mashed potatoes with extra butter, and that silly gravy Henry always said was too thick. I set the table with the good plates, lit a candle, put on the radio. And then I waited. You didn't come. I'm not angry. I've learned that people don't mean to forget. They just get busy remembering themselves. I used to think family was something that stayed full forever, a table that never empties. But now I see that family is a wave. It crashes, then retreats, and if you're lucky, it comes back again. I don't blame you for living your life. I'm proud of you for it. I only wish you knew that every choice you make, every breath you take, is still tethered to me somehow. A mother never stops holding on, even when she's no longer being held. I stopped writing then, looked around the room. The chair beside me creaked, as though Henry was still listening. I could almost hear his voice, gentle and teasing. You'll scare them with all that poetry, Martha. They'll think you've gone sentimental. And I smiled, whispering, I've been sentimental since the day you left. If you ever find this letter, I continued, don't feel guilty. Don't feel sad. Just promise me one thing. When you sit down to dinner, look around the table. Notice who's missing. And if someone's missing, call them. Because love doesn't die from anger. It dies from silence. You know, I was thinking tonight, maybe I've been looking at this house the wrong way. It isn't empty. It's full of everything we've been. Every argument, every laugh, every chair that was ever pulled out for someone who didn't stay long enough. I still keep your favorite mug, Daniel. The one with the chipped handle. Linda, your scarf is still hanging on the back of the chair. Emily's drawings are still on the fridge. I guess I never learned how to move things that mattered. Maybe that's why I'm still here. I put the pen down for a while. Just sat there, staring at the paper. The ink still wet in some places, as though the words themselves hadn't decided whether to stay or fade. The clock ticked on. The night outside whispered softly, the kind of quiet that feels alive. Then I picked up the pen again. If you're reading this someday, I wrote, and the house feels strange without me. Don't cry. Just make dinner. Sit in my chair. Talk. Laugh. Remember that love isn't gone just because it's quiet. Every time you smell something cooking that reminds you of home, that's me. Every time you catch yourself humming one of my songs, that's me too. Every time you look at Emily and see my smile, I'm there. Love doesn't need a voice to stay. It only needs to be remembered. I folded the letter carefully, the paper trembling just slightly between my fingers, tied it with a ribbon, blue, the color Henry liked best, and slipped it into the drawer beside the table. Maybe they'll find it someday. Maybe not. But at least I'll have said what I needed to say. To them. To myself. To the silence that has become my closest companion. Sometimes you write letters not to be read, but to remind yourself that your voice still exists. Sometimes love doesn't come back with fanfare. It doesn't knock loud or call ahead. It just shows up quietly, like rain after a long dry spell. It had been 4 days since I wrote the letter. The paper was still tucked away in the drawer, the ink sealed into silence. I hadn't touched it since. The days passed the same way they always did. Morning coffee, slow walks, feeding the birds outside the kitchen window. But that morning felt different. The air had that smell, the one right before rain. When the sky looks heavy but kind. I was boiling water for tea when I heard it. A car door, then footsteps on the porch. Soft, hesitant, like someone remembering how to come home. I froze for a moment, my heart doing that strange flutter it hadn't done in years. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one had said they were coming. But that's the thing about hope. It never really leaves. It just gets quiet until the sound of footsteps wakes it up again. Then, a knock. Not hurried, not loud, just 2 gentle taps. I wiped my hands on my apron, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. There she was, Emily, standing on my porch with her hood pulled up, rain dripping from her hair, and that same dimpled smile I hadn't seen in months. "Grandma," she said softly. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by." She wasn't in the neighborhood. She lived 40 minutes away. But I didn't say that. I just smiled. "Come in, sweetheart. You'll catch your death out there." She stepped inside, bringing the smell of wet grass and something else. Youth, life, the sound of the world that had gone on without me. "Tea?" I asked. Always, she said. And just like that, the house sounded alive again. The kettle hissed, the chairs made noise. And for the first time in a long time, someone sat across from me at the table. We didn't talk much at first. I asked about school. She asked if I was still baking. And between our words were pauses. Soft, careful pauses. That said more than either of us dared to admit. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on the old candle stub, the plates still stacked neatly. Were you expecting someone? She asked. I hesitated, then smiled. I guess I always am. Her eyes softened. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. Small, warm, real. I'm sorry we don't come by more, she whispered. Dad's been so busy, and Mom. I stopped her. I know, sweetheart. I know. I squeezed her hand gently. You don't need to explain life to me. I've lived most of it. For a while, we just sat there, listening to the rain tapping the windows like soft applause. Then she noticed something on the table, a folded napkin, and under it, the corner of the letter. What's this? She asked. I smiled faintly. Just a letter I wrote for no one. Can I read it? I hesitated. The instinct was to say no, to keep it tucked away, safe, unread. But looking at her, I realized maybe it was meant for someone after all. Yes, I said quietly. You can. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes moving slowly over each line. As she read, her lips parted just slightly, not in surprise, but in that quiet way people do, when they recognize truth. By the time she reached the last words, her eyes were glassy. Grandma, she whispered, you're not alone. I promise. I know, darling, I said, but sometimes even promises need company. She stood, came around the table, and wrapped her arms around me. Her hug was warm, trembling, smelling faintly of rain and lavender shampoo. I held her the way I used to when she was small, my hand resting on the back of her head, my chin on her hair, and for that moment, the world felt soft again. The air, the house, even my heart, all breathing the same rhythm. When she finally pulled away, I said, Stay for dinner. She smiled. I can't, Grandma. I promised Mom I'd be home by 7. I nodded. Then take some with you. I made too much anyway. As I packed leftovers into a box, she looked around one last time. Grandma, she said, when I was little, I used to think this house was magic. It still is, I told her. You just have to stay long enough to hear it. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and stepped back into the rain. I stood at the doorway, watching her car pull away. The taillights glowed red in the fog, then disappeared. The house felt quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This one felt softer, lighter, like the echo of a voice still lingering after a goodbye. I sat back at the table, poured myself another cup of tea, and whispered into the stillness, maybe love doesn't have to come back to stay. Sometimes it just needs to visit, to remind you it still remembers the way home. Every home has a heartbeat. You don't notice it when it's full. It hides beneath laughter and clinking plates, but when the voices fade, when the door closes again, the heartbeat returns. Slow, steady, lonely, like the echo of what once was. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one felt heavier in the corners but lighter in the heart. Emily's laughter still hung in the air somewhere, caught between the walls like sunlight refusing to leave. Her teacup sat on the table, half full, a faint lipstick mark on the rim. I couldn't bring myself to wash it yet. It was proof that she'd been here, proof that the world hadn't completely moved on without me. I turned toward the chair. The chair. My chair. the one I'd waited beside, the one that had listened to every sigh, every prayer, every dinner that never was. The cushion was a little worn, one arm slightly more polished from my hands resting there over the years. I walked over slowly and sat down, the wood creaking beneath me like it was greeting an old friend. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry when I did. The candle stub still sat in the center of the table. Its wax had hardened into small folds, like waves frozen mid-ocean. I ran my fingers across it, remembering the night I'd lit it for them, and kept it burning for hope. It had burned itself out completely, but somehow its smoke had left warmth behind. I suppose, I whispered. Some things give all their light quietly. As I sat there, I thought about the word empty, how much space it takes up, how unfairly it names things. An empty room isn't empty if it remembers. An empty chair isn't empty if it's waiting. And a quiet heart isn't lifeless. It's just full of echoes. I realized then that I had been mourning not people, but time, the moments that slipped through my hands, because I was too busy holding on to what had already passed. The sky outside was turning pink, that fragile kind of color that only exists for a few minutes before it disappears. I'd always told Henry sunset was my favorite time, the hour when the world forgives itself for ending another day. I wondered if maybe love worked the same way, not gone, just resting, softening into peace. I thought of all the dinners that never happened, the phone calls that never came, and the birthdays that slipped by unnoticed. But instead of sadness, I felt gratitude, because at least I got to love. At least I had people to miss. That's more than some ever get. If loneliness is the price of having loved deeply, I whispered, then I suppose it's a fair one. The chair creaked again, a small, familiar sound. It almost felt alive, like it knew it was part of something bigger than wooden nails, like it knew it had held generations. Their laughter, their weight, their warmth. I smiled and ran my hand along the armrest. You've been a good listener, I said softly. Thank you. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I leaned back, closed my eyes, let the stillness hold me instead of scare me. Outside, a car drove by, headlights brushing across the window. Somewhere far away, I heard the faint echo of a child's laughter. Or maybe it was just the wind. Either way, it didn't matter. It sounded like love. I smiled. Maybe, I whispered. Chairs don't stay empty. They just wait for whoever remembers to come home. For a long time, I sat there with my hands folded, the air thick with memory but calm. And when the clock struck 8, I didn't flinch. I didn't look toward the door. I simply whispered, "Thank you for visiting, my loves. Dinner's still warm." Peace doesn't come when the house fills again. It comes when you realize the love that once filled it never truly left. There comes a day when you stop setting the table for who's missing and start setting it for yourself. It had been a week since Emily's visit, a week since her laughter wandered through these rooms and reminded the walls what it felt like to be alive. A week since I'd watched her drive away through the rain. The house had gone quiet again. But this quiet felt different now. Not sharp, not heavy, just gentle, like the calm that follows a storm when everything is still damp, and the earth smells like forgiveness. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked again, but not for them, for me. I peeled the potatoes slowly, watching the thin skins fall like curled ribbons into the sink. Cut vegetables the way Henry used to, uneven but full of heart. Hummed a tune under my breath. It was strange how the rhythm came back so easily, like my hands had just been waiting for permission to move again. The smell filled the kitchen, garlic, thyme, butter melting into memory. The same smell that once meant family, now meaning peace. I set one plate at the table, just one. No candles, no napkins, no pretense. Just a meal. And me. The chair creaked a little when I sat down. It felt like it was sighing with me, a sound halfway between sadness and relief. I looked across the table, to the empty chairs, and for the first time, they didn't feel like reminders. They felt like witnesses, like they were saying, "You kept the promise. You waited. You loved." I picked up my fork, took a small bite, and whispered, "This one's for me." The food wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was warm, and quiet, and honest. Halfway through the meal, I caught my reflection in the glass of the cabinet, hair silver now, eyes softer but steady, and for a moment, I saw not what I'd lost, but what I'd kept, a heart still capable of love, a home still capable of warmth. After dinner, I poured myself tea, chamomile, the same kind I used to make for Henry on restless nights. I carried it to the living room and sat near the window, watching the rain shimmer in the porch light, drops gathered on the glass, racing each other down like tiny stories meeting halfway. I smiled and thought, maybe we're all just raindrops, falling, wandering, trying to find our way back to something that feels like home. Somewhere inside, a peace settled, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally stopped trying to fix what didn't need fixing. I had spent so many years feeding others, keeping love alive in casseroles and phone calls and hope. But tonight, I'd fed myself, and that counted too. They may forget your dinners. I whispered, but love never forgets the hands that cook them. The night stretched gently across the house. No voices, no footsteps, just peace. Before I went to bed, I placed one extra plate on the table, empty, and smiled. It wasn't for anyone in particular. It was for whoever remembered, for whoever might walk in someday, and finally see the seat that had always been waiting. You know, I whispered into the quiet, love doesn't end with presents. It ends when you stop believing it can return. So I'll keep a seat open, just in case. I turned off the light, and for the first time in years, the darkness didn't feel lonely. It felt warm, full, alive. If you're listening to this story right now, my voice breaks slightly, but softens again. Maybe you've been there too, waiting, hoping, forgiving. Tell me, have you ever cooked for people who never showed up, or sat by a phone that never rang? Do you know what it's like to love quietly, without expecting anything back? If you do, you're not alone. There are millions of us, silent hearts still setting tables, still keeping candles lit, still believing someone will remember. So before you go, call someone who might be waiting. Visit your mother. Text your grandmother. Sit at the table that built you, because one day you'll wish you hadn't waited until it was too late. And if you're still here listening to my voice, thank you for visiting. You just made an old woman's house feel full again.